Great Lakes Prepping here. In today's video, I've got something really exciting for you. We're making one of the most amazing grilled cheese sandwiches you've ever seen. It's something that I'm calling the East Side Pesto Melt. That's right, we're making a grilled cheese sandwich with delicious, freshly made pesto and a whole lot of other ingredients, as you can see here. In fact, you may have never seen a grilled cheese sandwich before that requires so many ingredients, but I promise you it's worth it if you're looking for something really special and delectable as far as a grilled cheese sandwich goes. Fresh basil pesto, 2 kinds of Italian cheese, bacon, and an absolutely incredible sun-dried tomato spread that, in my opinion, ties the whole sandwich together. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of steps to go through. We have to make the pesto, we have to make the sun-dried tomato spread, fry up some bacon, and then put this whole thing together. So let's get started making the East Side Pesto Melt. Okay, first up, we're gonna start with our fresh basil pesto. And of course, for that, we need lots of fresh basil. What we want is to have 2 cups of tightly packed basil. So the first thing I'll do is give it kind of a rough chop so I can start packing it into a measuring cup. Next, we of course need our garlic. So I'll just give 3 good sized garlic cloves, just a rough chop. Next, we need a 1/4 cup of pine nuts, and you can optionally roast these if you want first. I don't really bother with that usually. And I'll say, I don't know if you've seen the price of pine nuts these days, but they are just not cheap. So if you prefer to skip the pine nuts, it's still gonna be a good basil pesto. And we got 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt, 1/2 cup of grated Parmesan cheese, and 1/2 cup of extra virgin olive oil. Now we blend the whole thing up. You can of course do all of this in a food processor, and in fact, if you were gonna make a batch really any bigger than this, that's what I'd recommend. But I'm making kind of a normal to small size batch, so I'm gonna use my favorite Immersion blender. And there we have our amazing creamy fresh basil pesto. All right, next up is our sun-dried tomato spread. And we're gonna start with, of course, our sun-dried tomatoes. Now these are just the kind of sun-dried tomatoes that you buy in a jar. They're packed in oil, which we're gonna keep. We're not gonna add any extra oil because it's already got the oil in there. For this batch, we're just using an 8.5 ounce jar. And once again, since I will be using the Immersion blender, we're gonna go ahead and just pour this all into a big jar here. And we've got 1 tablespoon of brown sugar, 1 teaspoon of dried basil, 1/2 teaspoon kosher salt, and then 1 small can's worth of tomato paste. You know the little cans I'm talking about. And once again, we go to the Immersion blender. Now, I don't need to turn this into an absolute liquid. I want to get it completely smooth, but if it's got a little bit of texture to it, and that's all there is to it. There's our sun-dried tomato spread. And by the way, if you're ever looking for just an awesome dip for some crackers or a spread to put really on anything, give this stuff a shot. This is so good. I promise you not a drop of this goes to waste when I make a batch. I end up getting every last little bit out of here with some Ritz crackers or similar. Well, now's a good time as any to talk about our cheese. For this sandwich, I'm using Fontina cheese and mozzarella cheese. I've got this beautiful big block of mozzarella and this little wedge of the Fontina. Now, a couple of notes about cheese. You could use shredded mozzarella or even the slices of mozzarella from the store, but I really do recommend finding yourself a big block like this, or even one of those balls or the logs of the fresh mozzarella, and slice it up yourself. It's just going to taste so much better. And the Fontina, you might not be able to find Fontina cheese everywhere. And if that's the case, some good substitutes are something like provolone or Havarti. But I found myself this wedge of Fontina, so that's what we're using today, and that's what this dish would call for, according to me, since I came up with it. And since I don't have a fancy cheese slicer, I'm trying to think of how I can safely cut a couple of thin slices of this Fontina. I'm going to try using my mandolin. For the Fontina, I want them pretty thin. Now that looks just about perfect. I don't know why I never thought to use this thing for slicing cheese before. I bet every single one of you out there is thinking, of course you use that for slicing cheese. What are you thinking? But I didn't know. That's perfect. That is just exactly what I want. So I want to make enough of these slices to perfectly cover the bread. So it looks like I'm going to need about 1 1/3 slice for each slice of bread. So I guess I'll cut up 3 slices. And another quick note with the cheese, I recommend leaving this cheese out for a little while after you slice it to let it start to come to room temperature. Because there's a lot going on with this sandwich. There's a lot of cheese, and we don't want anything overly refrigerated that's going to make the cheese take longer to start melting, especially with this mozzarella, because we're cutting that a bit thicker. Okay, now on to the mozzarella. I really like these big rectangles of it because they almost perfectly cover the slice of bread. So I want 2 big thick slices of this, so I have to adjust my mandolin a little here. Yeah, that's a good thick slice. You could even go just a little thicker than that if you wanted, but I'm liking the looks of that. And of course we need something with which to butter the bread, and I'm not actually using butter. For this I'm going to use mayonnaise. Not only mayonnaise, I'm going to add in just a little bit of grated Parmesan. So it's about 1 cup of mayonnaise and 1 tablespoon of the grated Parmesan. This ends up crisping up and just giving you the most amazing golden brown on that bread when we start to fry it. But you could use butter if you prefer. Now don't you think I forgot about this bacon. So what we're going for with the bacon is to cook it until it's just not quite at the point of crispy. We don't want it overly crunchy, just nicely cooked. And now we'll just give that bacon a rough chop. Okay, are we finally ready to start assembling this sandwich? I think we are. Now here I've got some nice Italian white bread. You can really use any kind of bread you prefer, but this is an Italian sandwich, and I love Italian bread, so it just makes perfect sense to me. Now, the first thing we want to do is start putting our cheeses on. We're going to start with the Fontina. And we're going to put a slice on each side. Of course, we got our little half pieces here to make sure we're going edge to edge. Next, we're adding our big ol' slices of mozzarella. Now here's where it starts to get interesting. We're going to take some of that fantastic pesto and spread it all over the cheese on this side. Making sure to get as close to edge as we can without having a massive spillover. Just a nice thick coat of that pesto. And by now I bet you can guess what we're going to do with the other side. If you guessed sun-dried tomato spread, you would be 100% correct. Nice thick but not too thick coating on each side there is what we're looking for. Nice, evenly distributed. Now it's bacon time. I'm going to take some of that bacon and just sprinkle it over 1/2 of this. Not trying to make a mountain of bacon, just kind of give everything a little bit of coverage. I don't want to overwhelm it with bacon because there's a lot of big flavors going on here. Now Very carefully, I will join these two halves together. Now, I've spent a lot of time working out what is the ideal order of assembly for a sandwich like this with all these different components. And I've found that putting it all together first and then applying my butter, or in this case mayonnaise, to one side is the way to do it. Just a nice skim coat all the way edge to edge. We're not trying to load up on mayonnaise too heavy, just enough to give it a nice coating. All right, we're back over to the stove, and I've got a nice clean skillet heating up. Get it nice and hot before I put in my sandwich. And of course, I'm going to place it in the skillet very carefully with the side that I've already spread the mayo on facing down. I want to make sure that cheese is all melted by the time that bread gets toasted to where we want it. And while this is sitting in here, I'm going to go ahead and spread the mayo on my other side. Now, when you've got as much cheese and stuff going on here as we do here, we really want to maximize that melting time, because it's always a race between the cheese melting and the bread becoming overcooked. We don't want to burn the bread. We don't want to have cold, unmelted cheese. And there we have it, our finished product. And of course, we're going to cut into it and see how it looks. That is what I'm talking about. Crispy golden brown bread, melty Fontina and mozzarella cheese. Of course, the star of the show is the pesto and that tomato spread. Honestly, you could probably live without the bacon. It just adds a little something. It's definitely not the standout of the sandwich like bacon so often is in a sandwich. If you're a big fan of pesto and these kinds of flavors, you really need to try this sandwich. There's a lot of steps, there's a lot of ingredients to lay out and things you have to do. But if you're looking for something interesting for the family dinner or having some guests over for lunch, it's going to be something they've probably never tried before, and I promise they're going to love it. And if you do give it a shot, let me know in the comments of this video how you enjoyed the East Side Pesto Melt. I'm going to finish eating this sandwich before it gets cold. So that's it for now. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including new food videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time in the Great Lakes Kitchen.